NFL season is over. Now we're into the playoffs. 6 very intriguing games, more so in the AFC. And this is the first year that we're going to have 3 Saturday games and 3 Sunday games. So normally you get the, 4:30 and 8 p.m. or so Saturday games, and then you get the 1 o'clock and 4:30 Sunday games. Now we're getting 1 o'clock Saturday and then Sunday night. So it's going to be awesome. But let's look back at what led us to some of these matchups and who got in, who didn't get in, who got a bye. So in the NFC, the Packers were able to take care of business. They secured the 1 seed, the all-important 1 seed, because it used to be the 1 and 2 seeds would get a bye. Now just the 1. So the NFC playoffs will go through Lambeau Field, which is very important. And Aaron Rodgers just looks so locked in. It looked like maybe he was starting to dip just a little bit. He's back and better than ever. It's really, really impressive. So that team's going to be dangerous just based on that alone. It's a wide open NFC. So we'll see how it all transpires, but you have to say that they are maybe not a huge favorite, but they are. They are a favorite in the NFC. And they won a game in Chicago against a team that needed the win. Now, Chicago was able to clinch a playoff berth based on the fact that Arizona lost to the Rams. And going into that game, we knew that Jared Goff was out. So it kind of gave Arizona an opportunity. However, Kyler Murray did get hurt the week before against San Francisco in what turned out to be a critical loss to the Niners. The Niners played spoiler. They did. If Arizona wins that game, they would have been in the playoffs. And so it's a bad job by the Cardinals where, they won the Hail Murray game against the Bills. They won a big game on Sunday Night Football against the Seahawks. It was looking good for them, and they just weren't able to get it done. In a league that now features 7 teams making it in AFC and the NFC, in a tough division, they definitely have some thinking to do. And, Kingsbury, I'm sure he'll be back, but he could be on the hot seat if things don't work out next year, for sure. So the Rams, it wasn't pretty at all. They didn't get any offensive touchdowns. It was a pick 6, some field goals. They got a safety. It was an ugly, ugly game. But the Rams were able to get in the playoffs as well. And the Bears, the score was a bit misleading against Green Bay. The Bears played all right. They hung in there, but Green Bay had a lot on the line. So I ended up being wrong. I had predicted that I thought Chicago would be out because I thought Arizona would be. I didn't think Chicago would beat Green Bay. That played itself out. But what I was wrong about was Kyler Murray's health was way more problematic than I ever thought it would be. And so that changed the whole course of that game. In terms of the rest of the NFC, the Saints and Seahawks both won, and it didn't matter much because Green Bay ended up taking care of business. But things could have flipped. I mean, if the Saints had somehow lost, then I guess they would have moved to the 3 seed. But as it turns out, the Seahawks to the 3, the Saints to the 2. The Bucks beat the Falcons in a game which was important to them because by winning, now you're playing Washington, which is preferable compared to Seattle. It just is. So Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, they had every reason to play that game hard and try to win. And they did. So they locked up the 5 seed. So in the NFC, you are looking at the Saints versus the Bears in New Orleans. And that's the middle game on Sunday. You're looking at a divisional matchup. Seahawks and Rams. That'll be the middle game on Saturday. And then the 4-5 is Washington hosting Tampa, and that'll be the Saturday night game. So, in looking at these games, they appear lopsided. And it's the playoffs, you never know what could happen. But New Orleans, Chicago, I like New Orleans to win this game. I really do. I'm not going to get into spreads much. New Orleans right now, and a lot can change for so many reasons, with COVID really kind of being top of mind. I think because this game is Sunday, I think you will see Kamara in. That's just my inclination. We don't know for sure, but I tend to think that'll be the case. But there could be new unfortunate illnesses that pop up, or injuries. But as we know it now, it's definitely like New Orleans to win this game. Chicago's been playing good football. They have been. And I think New Orleans, they have really not gotten it done in the playoffs recently. They won a Super Bowl many years ago. And, they got kind of hosed a few years ago against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. They did. But last year, they first round lost home against Minnesota. Now, for the Bears, under Matt Nagy, a few years ago, they lost to the Eagles in the first round. They haven't really had a whole lot of playoff experience. Trubisky was the quarterback, and that was the Cody Parkey doink game. And I just think that the Saints I have questions about, but I think with a somewhat healthy Breeze, we'll see what Michael Thomas's status is. But the Saints defense, for the most part, has been pretty solid. And so I think that they shouldn't have much of an issue winning this game. Now, I guess I'll also give my opinion on who I want to win these games. A lot of these games I don't really have that strong of a feel in terms of who I want, but I will say this. I'm looking forward to future good matchups. So New Orleans, Chicago, it'd be cool for the upset part of it for Chicago to win, but I think New Orleans winning would just be more fun because then you're looking at potentially New Orleans against maybe Seattle in that 2-3 matchup. So let's get into Seahawks-Rams in Seattle, divisional. So when it's the divisional matchups, you really just don't know. It really, they're just so unpredictable. The thing is, Jared Goff, who, honestly, he's whatever. That's my opinion of Jared Goff at this point. He may or may not play. It's definitely up in the air. And I think a healthy Jared Goff really puts that game in major question for me. But with him being banged up, I'm going to give the edge to the Seahawks. It's in Seattle. Seattle just beat him a few weeks ago. Would it shock me if the Rams won? No. But I am, out of the NFC wildcard games, this one is definitely the most interesting. And really the main reason is it's just that NFC West battle that we've been looking for. This was one of the stronger divisions in the NFL this season. And I just think that Russell Wilson, he'll find a way to do enough. It hasn't been the let Russ cook times, ever since Chris Carson came back. It's been more of a conservative approach. We'll see if they open things up. But I expect this to be more of a low-scoring game. And when you think Seahawks-Rams, your first assumption might be, this could be high scoring. I don't see it that way, especially with the way these teams are playing. I think that, if you can get to 24 points, that might just be good enough to win the game. Both defenses have improved. Sure, they've had some pretty weak opponents. But let's just be honest. The Rams lost to the Jets. They then lost to the Seahawks in a tough game. And then you can't give them that much credit with the Cardinals because look at what Arizona's situation was. So I think that you're likely looking at a Saints-Seahawks second-round matchup. Now Tampa-Washington. And I touched on this briefly in the last episode, but I like Tampa to beat them. And it's more because Tampa's defensive front, it's really good at stopping the run. So you're really going to have to depend on Alex Smith. And I just don't think that's a recipe for success. Tom Brady might be in a bit of trouble against Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Payne. And I just think that Tampa has a lot of receiving options. Antonio Brown is really starting to come on. Chris Godwin as well. Mike Evans, he is hurt. We're not sure whether he will or won't play. Obviously, if he plays, that's a big boost. If he doesn't, I think they still have the wherewithal to get it done. Even Rob Gronkowski's had some pretty big moments too. So I like the Bucs to beat Washington. I think Washington's defense can keep them in the game. I think the Bucs will do just enough to win. So based on my predictions, and I think that Seahawk-Ram game is the one where I'm least confident in, but let's say Seattle wins that. Next week, we're looking at Green Bay, Tampa, Aaron Rodgers versus Tom Brady, and then the Saints versus the Seahawks in New Orleans, Drew Brees versus Russell Wilson. And that's just what you want as a fan. That's exciting. And, Tom Brady at Lambeau, you just don't see that. Tom Brady was in New England. I mean, he probably played at Lambeau Field maybe a couple of times. Maybe give or take 2 times. And this year, Tampa Bay destroyed Green Bay in Tampa. And that's going to be interesting to me. There's a lot of potential matchups here. Like New Orleans did whatever they wanted to in the 2 games against Tampa. But then Tampa actually did really well against Green Bay. So will there be a correction for the team that lost? Or will this just be a trend that continues? But sign me up for those matchups. So while I think that in the NFC, it's a little bit lackluster, these 3 games, I do think that the potential is really there for the last 4 teams in that conference for it to be really fun. So I'm looking forward to that. AFC. Let's talk about the AFC. So that did go as I predicted. The Colts got the help they needed. They did. And you figured home against Jacksonville that they would take care of business. Now that was a 4-20 game. 4-25. And Jacksonville, much to my surprise, they actually stayed in it. Indy jumps out to a 20-0 lead, but Jacksonville cut it to 6 and had the ball in the 4th quarter. So it wasn't pretty, and Indy had lost to Jacksonville in week 1, and that was Jacksonville's only win of the season, but they were able to do enough. Jonathan Taylor has been fantastic. He really has been something special down the stretch here. And it's needed, because Phillip Rivers, in order for the Colts to win, you don't want to trust Phillip Rivers to be throwing the ball 40, 50 times. That's just not a recipe for success. It isn't. So the Colts got the help they needed, and it was the Miami Dolphins that lost to the Buffalo Bills. Give Buffalo credit. For many reasons, they didn't really need to use their starters. They didn't have to, because Pittsburgh, who they were in competition for the 2 seed, and mind you, Buffalo was the one that controlled that seeding because they beat Pittsburgh. So as long as Buffalo won, it didn't matter what Pittsburgh did. However, Pittsburgh didn't start Ben Roethlisberger and a few other starters. They did, it was basically their full receivers, full running backs. So it wasn't like an Eagles complete tank situation. But it was kind of close to it. But you understand why the Steelers did it. Look, they want Roethlisberger healthy for the playoffs. So I can't fully fault them. But I'm sure if you were a Steeler fan, you probably would have liked to have seen the Browns continue that playoff drought. So it's a little bit tough. And the Steelers came so close. If they hadn't missed the 2-point conversion, who knows what the result would have been. And if the Browns had lost, the Dolphins would have been the ones that got in, not the Browns. So the Steelers did kind of help the Browns get in. And now they're going to play each other this week, which is really interesting too. The Steelers are now going to play the Browns this week. But the Dolphins really got destroyed in Buffalo. And Ryan Fitzpatrick wasn't even an option. But like I said, because of COVID, he was out. But if he had been, he had to start over Tua. Tua just doesn't have it right now. And I understand that Brian Flores is looking more about the future and not now, but just for the sake of your players, it was a 10-5 team. And even with that loss, a 10-6, in a league where 7 teams make it from the conference, you would have thought that would have been good enough. It wasn't. It was not good enough. They didn't make it at 10-6. Whereas, flip it to the NFC, the Chicago Bears made it at 8-8. So if you're a Dolphin fan, you're definitely not feeling great about things, although they secured the number 3 pick in the draft thanks to that ridiculous trade with the Texans. So they do have that. But Tua just has not been impressive to me at all. It's only year 1, but Justin Herbert, just 1 pick later, looks amazing with the Chargers. So that would have me not feeling so great, but we'll see what happens. But Buffalo just, in every facet of the game, destroyed them. Isaiah McKenzie, all of a sudden, I mean, just in the return game, in the receiving game, everything. But Buffalo is just so locked in right now. They are dangerous. This is the best I've ever seen the Buffalo Bills as a fan. They are looking really like they're going to be a threat in these playoffs. Baltimore took care of business against the Bengals. That didn't surprise me at all. Ravens are another team. Watch out for them. They are coming on strong. And then kind of the last piece of information that was of interest. So, like I said, the Bills beat the Dolphins. They get the 2 seed. Therefore, the Steelers are locked into the 3. They almost played spoiler against the Browns, even with no Ben Roethlisberger, but Cleveland holds on, clinches a berth. And the Dolphins had lost to the Bills, so they were hoping, their only way of getting in at that point, a Dolphin loss clinched a playoff berth for the Tennessee Titans. So by the time the Titans played, they knew they were in the playoffs, but they still wanted to win the division. So the only hope that the Dolphins had was if the Jaguars somehow beat the Colts. And like I said, it almost did happen, but it didn't. So Houston versus Tennessee was a very interesting game, and I give Houston credit. Like I said in the last episode, they did not have that pick. They did not have their own first-round pick. So for them, winning didn't really have much consequence. But Deshaun Watson was great and really had a very underrated good season. It was not Deshaun Watson's fault that Houston was as bad as they were this season. But this was just a great game. Derrick Henry, what can you say? The guy is just different. He's not like any other running back in this league. And he hit the 2,000-yard mark. And he needed 250 yards. He needed a huge day to do it. And he got it. And it was a fun game. And I think this has just been Tennessee football. Is just a really, really impressive offense and just a defense that doesn't get the job done. It doesn't. And that to me is worrisome moving forward. But Tennessee was able to do enough. They got a field goal at the end to clinch the AFC South. These AFC matchups are going to be great this weekend. I cannot wait for all of them. These are really good football teams. So the first game to start the weekend, 1 o'clock on Saturday, is the Colts at Buffalo. And I just can't wait. You know, you got to think January in Buffalo, got to be cold, maybe some snow. Look, we haven't seen Buffalo host a playoff game in about 25 years. It's been a long time since they've hosted one. And they had a tough loss last year to the Texans, where that was the game they should have won. Josh Allen made a lot of mistakes to cost them that football game, and Deshaun Watson was just making great plays. So, you know they're hungry. Very. But they're facing a pretty good Colt team. I think that this is a pretty well-rounded team. And the Colts would normally be a team that I'd say, I think this team can win a playoff game. And if they won, it would not shock me at all. I'm going to pick Buffalo just because they look really, really good. And Phillip Rivers, he has played I know obviously he's been with the Chargers for a very long time, but he has played in his fair share of cold weather games. Absolutely. But I just don't think he's going to be able to do enough to keep up with Josh Allen in this game. Buffalo's defense, it has some holes. It's not perfect. I think that it's been a little bit of a disappointment, but I think there's enough there. And I like to think that the Bills will win this game. And I'm pulling for them. I am. I would like to see the Bills make a nice run here. Nothing not to like here. As a Giant fan especially, there's no, No animosity whatsoever. And yeah, it's a New York football team. I mean, that's not the reason why I'm rooting for them, but I guess there can be one New York team that actually does something successful this season. And the 3-6 game is going to be the last game of the weekend, Sunday Night Football, Steelers and Browns. This is going to be great. And the last time the Browns made the playoffs was 2002. And I remember that game. And it was a really good game. Kelly Holcomb was the Browns quarterback. They were winning the game, and they blew a big lead to Pittsburgh, as you'd expect, right? Browns choking, Steelers getting it done. That's just kind of how it is. But Browns Steelers, it just makes sense. It makes sense that when the Browns make the playoffs again, that's who they're playing. One of their biggest rivals, if not biggest. And it's in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has shown some life again to me the last few weeks. They had a big win against the Colts. Even in this game against the Browns, where they had nothing on the line, really, for the most part, they played well. They did. So this is a game where I'm going to be rooting for Cleveland, definitely. But I do think Pittsburgh gets the job done. In Pittsburgh, it would be, if Baker Mayfield can go into Pittsburgh and win, that would be very big for his career. A really big turning point. It would be. And I think Cleveland's going to play him tough. This is going to be a grinded out, physical football game. This is like kind of what you envision. Like just, again, that cold weather, Sunday night. It's going to be, if you love football, this is going to be a very exciting game to watch. And I think there's a reason why they put it on Sunday night. So I'm going to pick the Steelers again, but I'd like to see Cleveland win. And then the 4-5 game, this one might be the most interesting of all. Ravens-Titans rematch of last season's AFC Divisional game. Now, that was in Baltimore. This is in Tennessee. And this year they played in Baltimore, and Tennessee won. Tennessee has played well against Baltimore, but Baltimore is coming in really hot. There's going to be a lot of points in this game. That Raven defense is good, but I'll give the edge there to the Titans offense. And I will for sure be rooting for the Titans. No question about it. However, I think the Ravens are going to win this one. I do. I think Lamar Jackson gets it done. And really the key here, if the Titans can jump out to a big lead, then the narrative changes entirely. If you tell me that the Titans jump out to like a 14-0 lead, and I know that's like an obvious statement. Well, duh, if they go up to 14-0, obviously you're going to predict them to win. But I don't think Baltimore has what it takes to come back. But if that game stays close, I actually, unfortunately, because I will be rooting for the Titans, I think the Ravens are going to win this game. And I think it's cool. This is like an old AFC Central matchup. And I meant to mention before, Bills Colts, when I was a fan, about 20 years ago or so, young Derek, the Indianapolis Colts and the Buffalo Bills were both in the AFC East. It doesn't have much meaning now, but it's just kind of funny to think about. An old AFC East rivalry, while short-lived, and then an old AFC Central matchup between the Titans and the Ravens. And that rivalry, it's kind of building up as some type of rivalry, even though they're not in the same division now. And I just remember back then, Titans-Ravens, when there was Eddie George versus Ray Lewis, and the Titans were coming off the Super Bowl appearance, and the Ravens beat them. The Ravens knocked them off. Tennessee had a very good season, won the division, and the Ravens beat them, and the Ravens would go on to win the Super Bowl against my Giants. So a lot of memories there. Totally different now. But Titans-Ravens, we've seen it before. We've seen it recently. And it's kind of a shame that I guess because it just doesn't have much name value, Titans-Ravens, as some of the other games, and that's kind of why it's the 1 o'clock Sunday game, because to me, this should have had more of a prime slot. This should be a great, great game with a lot of points. And if we're going to go based on my predictions, and really, quite honestly, out of what I'm predicting, the Ravens are the only technically lower seeded wild card team that I'm predicting to win. And I don't even view that as much of an upset. But I guess it's the closest thing. I don't have like any type of upset special this week. I think you're going to see a lot of chalk. The two divisional games, Rams Seahawks and Browns Steelers, those are unpredictable. I feel pretty confident about the Saints winning their game. I feel pretty confident about the Bucks winning their game. And while I think the Colts are a very worthy competitor, I like the Bills. But in the AFC, there's a decent chance you are looking next round at the 2-3 Bills-Steelers, which is a rematch of a game earlier this year in Buffalo. That should be a really good game. Especially if you consider that Pittsburgh, would have now kind of been back to where maybe they were. Like a better Pittsburgh team now than they were when they went to Buffalo a few weeks ago. So that's Josh Allen versus, does Ben kind of have like one last hurrah? But the big one is you would get Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson. Like, that would be amazing to see. And it was something that we were looking forward to potentially last season that didn't happen. And maybe Tennessee knocks that off again. And maybe we see a Tennessee-Kansas City AFC Championship rematch. That could happen too. So the storylines are kind of... There's a lot that could come out of this. And I like that the NFL added a couple of more games in the first round. That's great. Once that happened, I was all for that. And the divisional rounds, that's what I come out of this with. Is not the AFC in the first place is really good now, but just imagine what it could be as I kind of previewed next week. So that's kind of where my head's at. It's like, yeah, I want Cleveland to beat Pittsburgh, and yeah, like I want Tennessee to beat Baltimore, but I'm also kind of looking ahead like, wow, if we can kind of get some of these matchups, sign me up. I can't wait. So that's where we're at. That's how I see this wild card weekend shaping up. And this is going to be a fun playoffs. I'm looking forward to see who's going to be the new champion. Will someone take out the defending champions, the Kansas City Chiefs? That'll be the question.